All right. Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of Real Live Talk. My name's Duke Lamastra. I'm your host, and I'm pumped that you're here to check out this episode. And whether you're watching this live or catching this later on one of the podcast platforms or one of the video sites or whatever, just really appreciate you for taking the time to check out this episode. And I'm pumped for the opportunity to have the conversation tonight with my guest. Pastor Ricardo Johnson, who is a brand new friend of mine. We're just getting to know each other. And I'm just excited to talk with Ricardo this evening. Ricardo received his call into the ministry at the age of 17. And after working in Christian radio for a number of years, he entered into full-time pastoral ministry back in 2002. In 2012, he moved to pretty much my neck of the woods down here in Lower Alabama, in Baldwin County, to focus on church planting. And currently he's the lead pastor of Legacy Family Church in Daphne, Alabama. So, Ricardo, hope you can hear me okay, and I appreciate you being here, man. Thanks for doing this with me tonight.
Oh, thank you, Duke. We appreciate it, and God bless you for testing me out and seeing how I'm going to do here. It's good to
Yeah,
get to
man.
know you.
Yeah, it's good to get to know you too, and it's cool that we live so close to one another, and we've
Yeah,
got some stuff in common. Even the
yes,
names of our churches are very
yes,
similar and
yes,
stuff like that. So it's cool, man. I'm excited for this conversation, just to really just kind of have some fun with you tonight and get to know you and ask you some
sure,
questions, and we'll kind of see
sure,
where the conversation goes and how it develops
sure.
and all that. But yeah, it's an honor to meet you, and this is really our first actual conversation other than some texting, back and forth on LinkedIn and stuff like that.
Right,
So
right, right. It is. It is. Awesome.
yeah. So let's start real basic, man. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town, about a little bit south of Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio. The city that everybody jokes about, but this little town was called Medina, small little town, and
Medina.
I grew up a Baptist. You know, grandfather was a deacon for like almost seemed like 40 years in the church that I grew up in. My dad was not a churchgoer, but my mom
Okay.
was. And my dad would go to church, but at times when my mom was the real spiritual um, catalyst in the family. So
Yeah.
we kind of grew up in an area like that and small town atmosphere and where they would leave the doors open at nighttime, front doors open at nighttime, and you can't do that now.
Different world back then, huh?
Different world back then. I mean, I tell my kids that I would ride my bike all across town, and my mom would say, "Just be home before dark." That kind of thing. And I would be home, and I would be there before dark, and nothing would happen. So
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of a basic upbringing. As far as that goes, nothing really exciting about that. My mom and dad were married for almost 70 years. Um, thank God,
Wow.
and they never. I mean, there were times where there were some touch and go moments. Let's be honest. I mean, they would maybe argue with one another, but they stuck it out, man, for 70, close to 70 years, and he died first.
Wow.
And I
Good for
was
them.
able. This is awesome, Duke. I really am. What I'm getting ready to tell you is really awesome because it really touched me. I was able to do both of their funerals. My dad died first at 89, and I was able to preach his funeral. And then my mom, which was the hardest, of course, she
Mm.
died at 95 years old.
Wow.
And so I was there. Drove all the way up to Ohio because I was living down here and got there and she was still alive, but just barely. And I told her, "I'm here, Mom." And then I went back to change because I driven 19 hours. It's a long trip from here up to Ohio. And I said, "I'll be back to see you in the evening. I'm just going home to change and get, you know, just get straightened out because we've been driving all day long." So I went back, and before I could get to the hospital, they told me she had passed. I mean, back to the
Mm.
place where she was staying. They told me she had passed. So yeah, so I did her funeral. So I preached both of their funerals, and that was awesome to be able to preach their funerals. But
Wow.
crazy, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So
So that town, small town, was it like rural, a lot of farmland kind of thing, or was it an actual, town, just really, really small?
yeah, it was actual town, just really, really small. I mean, on the outskirts they had some farmland, but where I grew up in was like a town that was just really small. It was a town. It had, town square, everything, town bank. Everybody knew everybody. How you doing, Joe? Hey, kind of like if you got in trouble, people knew your parents. And but now the place is not that way. It's pretty big now, Medina. I mean, I think it still has somewhat of a small town effect, but now it's pretty big. It's grown to be pretty big. But yeah, it was a great. I when I look back on it, Duke, I think, man, I I was blessed to grow up in that kind of environment. I mean, I know a lot of people have stories where, I grew up in a drug infested, you know, home,
Sure.
and they have all these bad situations. Like I grew up, with abusive father, abusive mother, and all that stuff. And I mean, my dad was World War II veteran, so he was pretty strong about some things, but he wasn't abusive, and neither was my mom. They disciplined us like most parents, but um, they, yeah, they were good people. They were good people,
Mm.
and were known in the community as being good people. So that was a blessing to be in that kind of situation. So
Yeah,
yeah,
well, thank God for mothers that, took
yes,
us to church
yes,
and that took charge of our, spiritual growth and development and
yes.
stuff like that. I had a similar situation,
They're good. Yeah,
and, my dad was in church, but he was also, kind of in church and out of church for a lot of years, and my
same
mom
with
was definitely the one that kind of
yes.
kept things going, and, she was kind of my anchor point for a lot of years, sort of my strongest connection to God, and the one that really, taught me at home, taught me the word and taught me to pray and taught me to read the Bible and, taught
Right.
me like some disciplines of just growing with the Lord and being willing to, you know, sacrifice some time that as a kid I might have been, wanting to do other things or whatever, but she kind of instilled those values in me from a young age. And yeah, so thank God for moms that
Yeah.
that kept
Yeah.
us, somewhat on the right path through those early years.
It's true. That's true.
Yeah. Well,
They
that's
were
such
there.
a blessing, man, to be in the position that you're in today and to have been able to come full circle and to be able to honor your mom and your dad in that way.
Yes.
It's very cool.
I felt that. I felt, Duke, that was. I said, "Wow, what an honor," and they would want me to do it also. That they would want me to do it. That was the blessing. To my mom, and my dad both were in agreement. And so yeah, we did it. I was part of the church that my mom stayed at the same church all of her life. She was involved with the choir, and so I was part of that church when I was growing up. So when I came back, it was the pastor knew me. He said, "Are you going to do this?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can you do this?" I said, "Yeah, I can do it." I mean, you can get emotional. I mean, especially for my mom, and I said, "Man, but I have the sermon. I've never put it online. I almost was going to put it um, on my website, but I've never done it yet. I don't know why I haven't done it. It was like a couple of years ago, and I haven't done it yet. But it was a 30-minute message. But I talked about how when you don't realize you have greatness, and I talked about her being great.
Mm,
I said how people come in your life, and like people don't realize when they're talking to someone, and really in history, and they're a great person. Like I'm sure Martin Luther King, when he was around, Martin Luther King, and everybody knows who Martin Luther King was. I'm sure in the moment people just said, "Oh, well, he's doing speeches. He's trying to help people." But you realize now that that was greatness. That was history being made. And so that's what I said about her, and that she was a great woman, because she was, So anyway,
Yeah,
I don't know if you
absolutely.
want me to keep getting into that, but
Well, well, so I didn't mention this at the beginning when I was talking about you, but you've got an astronomical number of children, right? So,
yes,
so, so how many years have you been married, first
I
of all?
figured I figured you would you were going to ask about that. Yeah, it's what we got married in 2004. So what's that? 18 years, going on
Mm,
18 years this year. Yeah, 18 years this year, and we
beautiful.
have 8 children. And between
Just
me
say
and
that
my
number
wife,
again for the
eight,
kids in the back that didn't hear you.
eight,
Eight children, and
and we're getting ready to have our number ninth.
wow,
Um,
the way.
and number nine is coming in August. And next Tuesday, I'm going to find out the sex of number nine. We don't know. We tried with number eight. We said we were going to wait till the baby came out, and that killed me, man. I couldn't stand
It
it.
was
I'm
tough.
like, man, I can't. I said, oh man, and we did it. And then when the baby came out, I saw it was a girl. I said, wow, man. And my wife said, you want to do that again? I said, no, I don't want to do. I want to find out ahead of time because the suspense kills you. So Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, we're going to find out, what we're having. Now, currently, we have 5 boys and 3 girls.
Okay.
5 boys and three
All
girls,
right.
ranging from age 15, Duke, to 2. You know,
What
so
what what how do I say this? What were you thinking? No, I'm just kidding. No, but you don't have to answer that.
it's a
But
good story. It's a good story. You want to hear some of it? It's a
I would
good
love to.
story. It's a good story because you know what? Um, we were like everybody else. I was single on staff at the church up in Ohio, this big church. Um, and I was, my wife, when we got married, another lady at the church said, you got the number one single bachelor in the church because I was on staff teaching and ministering, and it was a large church, about 1,200. And so but anyway, yeah, we got married, and that's a whole another whole story because my wife is from Zimbabwe, Africa,
Mm,
which I've been there.
awesome.
I've been to Africa about 3 times, to two other different nations before I even went to hers. But um, that's interesting. We can talk about that because I've been on missionary trips there to Africa 3 times, two at least 2 times, and then to her place. But we were actually started out like everybody else. We got counseling from people and leaders at our church. I'll just say leaders at our church sat us down, and one of them had a lot of kids, and they said, "Look, not everybody's." And I thought that was kind of strange because they had about 5 kids, and they said, "Not everybody's out to have a lot of kids. What are you guys going to do about that? Are you guys going to do something? Are you guys need to think about that, before you get married and stuff?" So we were kind of going along with everybody else, and with the plan of just 2.1 children or whatever, two
Sure,
girls.
sure.
And what started touching, and it started with me first. My wife always says it started with me, and then she got a hold of it. But I was listening to, and I know now people kind of say about this family because there's some things that have happened with the oldest son. But the Duggards that have 19 kids and counting, they used to have
Mhm.
that show on um, what's it? The show on TLC,
Yeah, I know
and
what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, and it's called 19 Kids and Counting. And she came on one time, and this is her mantra. She always said that they started out kind of like we did. And then the Lord spoke to them, and they said that God spoke to them and started speaking to their hearts and saying, you need to have the same heart I have for children. You got to love children like I love children. And put the same, and they said, God, put your heart in me for children. And when they said that, 19 kids started coming. God started blessing them. When they started, because God's word says, be fruitful and multiply, and they took that literally. So,
Mm.
but I thought about that and I thought, wow, do I have the heart of God that God has for kids? Or are they a nuisance to you, or are they a bother to you? Or do you have the heart that God has for children? And when I started thinking about that, I said, I don't. I said, I need to open my heart. And I was discussing with my wife, and she would watch those shows and hear her and stuff. And slowly, God just started dealing with our hearts. So we had our first one, then we had our second, and then we had our third, and then we just after that, God just kept dealing with our hearts about it, and they just kept coming, one after
You just kept going.
another. So we're hey, people think we're crazy, but we're not crazy. We just feel we're blessed. I mean,
Mm.
you should see our house at nighttime. Man, if we don't, me and my wife, the only time we have to tell them, okay, you guys, we love you. We love every one of you, but it's time for y'all to get out of our room at nighttime.
Yeah, man.
Because they're all coming in there. It's time for you guys to get in your own beds and go to sleep, because me and your mom want to have some quiet time or time alone, because when they wake up, it's on the move until nighttime. They wake up. It's pretty wild in our house. In dinner, you can't you have to speak over one another because there's so many people speaking and talking. It's
Mm.
pretty amazing when you're in the midst of it all. But it's fun, man. It's a blast, man. You see when you see your little ones start, growing up and start watching their other little ones, and it's just
Yeah.
it's a blast, man. I mean, your house is full of life. It's full of life.
Yeah.
Look at
Absolutely.
you, yeah.
No. I see, um, I'm gonna live vicariously through you on this one, but no, but I mean, that's a beautiful thing, it's an incredible blessing. I mean, if you for sure, when the grace of God is on your life for that, like, God's not gonna call you to do something like this and not give you the grace and not give you the
Right,
favor, not give you the abundance, and not give you everything that you need to carry it out and to make it happen. And it's
right.
just such a beautiful thing. And I could just imagine that, like, as you were talking there and describing your family at dinner and
Mhm.
all that, it's got to be chaotic, but at the same time, just so much beauty in that. And I
Right.
mean, fast forward 20 years from now, and you're looking back, you're gonna have zero regrets in terms
Right.
of, did we stop having kids too early? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Because when they're growing up and they're having their grandkids and your family just continues to grow and multiply more and more, it's just gonna be, I mean, it's already a beautiful thing, but it's just gonna keep getting better and more full. And it's just such a cool thing. So I
well,
hats off to you.
the thing I get the thing I get from people is when they see us, I always hear this, Duke. I've heard it time and time again. I've always heard this from, and it's mostly women, obviously. They say, I wish I would have had more kids.
Yeah,
That's the number one thing. They always say, "Oh, your family's so beautiful," and then they're past the time of having kids, but they regret that they didn't have more. And I've heard that.
exactly.
I've not heard that once. If I could have a dime for every time I've heard that, I'd be a rich person, because they say that. And the other caveat, I want to add this to you, because we didn't mention this. My wife homeschools. So not only do we have, she, you're
No,
thinking
your wife, let's be honest,
she
your wife
does.
does not homeschool. Your wife is the principal of an elementary, middle school / high school.
But she
That's
does.
amazing.
She actually homeschools. She actually homeschools,
It's
and she's
beautiful.
had six students now. Six. And I was leaving the house today. She had them have their books out. They were doing their math, and my son was saying, six take away five, four. What's that? He was one of the son. They were doing their math. So I don't. She's an incredible woman. I'm blessed. I told her when we moved down here, I said, "Do you want to continue to do that, or do you want to put them in school, or what?" She goes, "No, I just feel God's calling me to continue to do that."
Mm,
So I said, "Wow." I said, "Okay, well, we'll continue to do that," and I can see the benefits of it. I can see the benefits of it. I mean, you know what? Financially, you take somewhat of a hit because you don't have two incomes coming in, just have one, mine, and and so, but you know what? The hit is worth it because I think in the long run, we're going to see God's blessing out of these nine
Yeah.
kids now. You
Yeah.
know, the hit's worth it. I mean, whatever you can suffer a little bit, if God's going to bless you to see those kids, because they're going to affect the world, right? In some
Absolutely.
way, in some way, they're going to affect the world, and you're hoping they affect the world positively. You're praying for that, and the thing that God put upon my heart, I'll just tell you this: that I prayed for each one of them. I still do. That they fulfill the purpose for which God created them for. Every single one of them have a purpose, and I said that's eight purposes more in this earth, and now nine coming that God can use, and whatever God had them born for, whatever God called them to do, I pray that they fulfill that purpose. People always say, well, I want my kids to, they say, oh, I want my kids to, whatever they want to do, I want them to do it the best. I want them to do the best at whatever they do. I don't say that. I don't believe that. I believe that I want them to do what God called them to do. And I want
Mm.
them to do that the best, not just do anything,
Yeah.
but do what God called them to do. Find God's niche, what God or called them to do, and then do it. And that's what I want them to do. So hopefully they will do that, and I'll be long gone probably when all of them fulfill it. But that's that prayer will still be there, and maybe they can pray that prayer for their kids too.
Wow.
So it's kind of it's legacy family church. That's what it's about, legacy, building the legacy. And so God, he never, in Genesis 1:26, he never relinquished that command, be
Come on.
fruitful and multiply. He never said, okay, you be fruitful to two, you be fruitful to three. He never relinquished that. He said, be fruitful and multiply, right? That's what he said. So we have to, we literally take that. We believe that he's still saying that today. And so we're just blessed. We thought we were done at 8. I thought, well, 8 must be it, because she wasn't pregnant. She wasn't getting pregnant. And I said, well, maybe this is it. And then all of a sudden one morning I was kind of half asleep in the bed, and she goes, honey, I got to tell you something, man. I was like, just. She goes, I took the pregnancy test, and she said, we're having another baby. I said, okay. I was just half asleep. And then so later on, I think that day or that evening, I asked her, I said, did you tell me you were pregnant again?
You weren't sure if it was real or if it was a
Yeah,
dream kind of
I was
thing?
halfway in Nana land, half out, half in. And, I was like, and she goes, yeah, I did. I said, oh, okay, awesome. Awesome. I said, that's awesome. But yeah, so I'm kind
That's
of glad.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Um, so, well, you mentioned your wife being from Zimbabwe.
Yes.
I'm curious how you guys met and, just sort of well, first of all, when you guys met, was she here living in this country already, or was she here visiting, or what was that like? Was she already living
Yeah.
here at the time when you guys got together, or
Sure. Sure. She had come here to go to school to get a degree in nursing, and either that or she was going to go into business. I think she had started out with nursing. And so, what was so strange about it? It was a God ordained thing, because three separate people told her about the church I was on staff at. Separate people. They weren't even related. Three separate people told her, this church is good. You need to check this church out. You need to check. And so finally, after the third person, she goes, I think I need to go check this church out. So she came to the church. And like I said, I was a pastor there on staff. So I just kind of, I saw her, and I said to my senior pastor, I said, because the church is, I'm African American, and we talked about this, me and you already, and the church was predominantly Caucasian. I mean, there were some African Americans that went there, and were prominent people, but for the most part, it was more Caucasian. So she came, and I said, and so I told my pastor, because I was teaching a class on prayer, and I said a 12-week course on prayer, and she came and said she wanted to learn about prayer. She wasn't even thinking about talking to me. She came to the class. So I told my pastor, I said, man, there's some really nice looking girl in this class that's coming to, and my pastor was encouraging me. He goes, man, talk to her, go talk to her. I said, well, hold on. I said, he was like, he was really encouraging me. So I said, well, I'll pray, we'll pray about it. So I prayed about it, and I felt like after the class was over, I waited till the class was over and she had went through all the courses, and I asked her, to out to like to go in and get something to eat, a bite to eat. And she thought I was going to ask her about the class. She said that's what she thought first when I came up to her, that I was going to ask her what she thought about the class.
Mhm.
And I said, yeah, I said, well, we can talk about that. I said, but I just wanted to talk to you, take you out. So we went out. The first time she brought her friend with her. And after that, the rest was history. We just kept talking and seeing each other. And then, I finally started dating her, and we became married at the church, there in Westlake, Ohio. So
Mm.
yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
that's kind of how it happened. Yeah. So obviously she didn't pursue anymore her she stopped pursuing what's coming over here for, and she focused on being married with me
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So
Well, I'm always curious about just sort of like the inner workings of, when there's intercultural relationships. My wife and I, my wife is from Mexico, and
yeah, you
I'm,
told
for anybody that isn't watch or that's only listening, not watching, I'm a white guy.
me.
And and yeah, and so there's definitely some interesting dynamics. I mean, there's always interesting dynamics when two people get together. There's always going to be, it's always two different people from two different cultures, from two different walks of life, whether
Right,
you're both American or both Mexican or both from
right,
Africa or, whatever. There's going to be differences in culture because of the way that you were raised, even
right,
different parts of the country where you were raised, and what kind of schools you went to, and what kind of, if you grew up in a city or a rural area or whatever. There's always going to be those differences that make it, there's unique challenges to every relationship, is what I'm trying to say.
right, right.
But I think that it's amplified many times when it's somebody who's from a completely different culture than yours, from a, different nation or something like that. Especially if
Right.
there's any kind of maybe between the families, there's some language barriers and just some different things. There's the distance aspect of family and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So just curious, what was that like for you guys coming together, getting to know each other, and did you deal with any kind of unique challenges like that along the
Well,
way?
yeah, we kind of, I mean, I don't know how they did with Mexico if they did this, but they want, her dad was talking about a bride price. I don't
Mm.
know,
And you were like, "It's over my
and
head."
I said, what is that all about? So they explained to me and what the culture in Africa was about paying a bride price. Um, my dad was alive at the time, and I told him, and I don't want to say what he thought about it. He goes, "Man, sounds like a scam." Man. I
It
mean,
sounds like a scam.
he
It's
just,
one of
he
those,
just,
you get those
my
emails
dad,
about
my
the
dad,
Nigerian princesses that need to be rescued.
yeah, he didn't say scam, but though he said something else, so I don't want to get into that.
I see.
But he because he wasn't, he wouldn't just say what he wanted to think. But anyway, but it's really real, and it's a cultural thing. So I discussed with her dad about it, and we did pay a bride price, and they have a name for it, and I wasn't actually there in Zimbabwe, but I had to actually do that. So I thought that was different. That's obviously different. We don't have to do that. Usually in America, we know this, that the girl pays for
Yeah.
the wedding, but there it was it was a little bit different. So um and we still do things for their parents, at different times, which is cool with me. That's fine with me. And they're my in-laws, and I've met them. They've come over here, and we have a great relationship with them. But I actually saw what they did, the interaction. It was cool to see because her sister, when we were in Zimbabwe, her sister got engaged and married, and they had 50 people in this. I mean, it wasn't even 500 square, maybe 600 square feet house. I don't know. I don't even think it was. I mean, it was a house, but it was small. It was
Yeah.
not so big. And they had like 50, 60 people in there, and her dad was going back and forth with the groom about the bride price, and then they were actually doing it live there, where I had to do it at a distance here in the United States. And I saw how they did it and how they what happened with that. So you were asking about that. That's one thing different.
Mm.
She actually, I don't know, does your wife still speak like the language, when she calls her parents and stuff like that on the phone, and or
Yeah, I mean, I have to so and we lived in Mexico at the beginning of our
okay.
marriage. We lived in Mexico for the first 3 years, and
Hmm.
so I learned Spanish as well.
Hmm.
And so my wife and I, we've never really had the custom together of speaking in Spanish. We only do it when we need to, like, hide stuff from our kids. We'll talk in Spanish. But but we met in America, and I did not speak Spanish at the time, so our whole dating relationship, we were speaking English all the time. So we never really developed the custom of speaking a whole lot of Spanish at home.
Right.
But when I lived in Mexico, I did learn the language, and now we still do a lot of ministry in Mexico,
Awesome.
and we do some online, ministry where we have a service, an online service that we do on Sunday mornings in Spanish, and we've done,
Awesome.
um, you know, outreach in the Latino communities here in Mobile and the areas around here a lot over the years, and so we've kept it going because otherwise, like, I would, it's so easy when you learn a language that's not your
Right.
native language. It's so easy to forget it if you don't keep practicing it. And so I
Right.
can get rusty like really quick if I don't keep it up. But anyway,
Right.
yeah. So my mother and father-in-law do not speak English, and they still live in Mexico. And so when I speak to them, it's all in Spanish. I mean, my mother-in-law she knows a good amount of English. Like, she'll try
Great.
to speak to me in English because she wants to practice and stuff like that. But yeah,
Right.
from the beginning, that was the most nerve-wracking thing for me, man, at the beginning.
Wow.
Because
How did
because
you do that?
I called up her dad when I wanted to ask his
Yeah.
permission if I could, first of all, just to date her. I called up to Mexico and asked, and then when I went down to Mexico to spend some time with them, and unbeknownst to my wife, I went down to also speak to her parents and ask them permission to marry their daughter and all of that. And so by then I knew a little bit more, but it was still not a whole lot, and so I'm sure it was very choppy, caveman
Wow.
sounding Spanish. But I remember that my wife, at the time, she wasn't even my girlfriend yet. She was just my love interest. But we hadn't even started dating yet, and she helped me. She was like, "Okay, well, what do you want to say to my dad?" And I basically told her, and she was translating it. And so I called up her dad and read this manuscript asking his permission to date his
Wow.
daughter. It was so awkward, but it was cool. I mean, and they super appreciated that I went that extra step to do that. And then we were in Bible college at the time, and my wife was like, at the time, well, at the time, my girlfriend, she was telling all her friends and stuff because she thought it was super sweet that I did that. So I got some good brownie points for that. But yeah, those just like things that are those extra steps and those extra just sort of cultural things that are
Right.
involved in these kinds of relationships that really it makes it fun and it makes it interesting. But that's a big one, man. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
do they do arranged marriages
N-
typically where she's
no,
from, or
no, no,
okay,
no, no, no. They don't do any arranged marriages like that. Like most of the Muslims and stuff like that. Sometimes they do that. They don't
I
do
see.
that.
I
But
see.
the thing is that there's another cool thing when you're over there in Zimbabwe and you go to visit people, they greet you, and the women. in the traditional way will come around with a pan for you to wash your hands, and because usually they're going to feed you, so they'll come around with a towel in a pan for you to go wash your hands. And they're always very appreciative of you and thankful of you and respectful of you. Yeah, I thought, wow, that's something. I said, I hope you don't never lose that when you come here, because I mean, America, we got the exact opposite, man. People just don't respect people, aren't very
Yeah.
thankful. It's just, they are very nice people, and when you're over there, they just really traditionally, um, the women greet you really well and are just nice to you. People are just nice. They're cordial. So I thought that was pretty cool. The language thing, she speaks Shana when she talks to her. It's Shana, and I have not learned. I've learned a couple of words in Shana, and she hasn't taught the kids anything. When she's trying to get them to do something, she might say a word like it's Shauna real quick, and
Sure.
she'll say something like she'll and they'll say okay, but she always she doesn't go around speaking the language to me, but she'll on the phone. She has talked to a friend of hers. There's a couple of twins that were up north in Indianapolis, and both of them got married, and they had a child just recently. So she was on the phone talking to her last night. She was speaking in Shauna, and and she's up in Indianapolis and Chicago. I think the other one's in Chicago. So I thought, you hear that, but I don't know. I don't have a word. Know
No
what she's
idea.
saying.
Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah. So you know if
It's
she's talking about you or not. It's,
yeah, that's why
just
I saw you talk about me. What? No, but yeah, you're just so appreciative when you go over there. You just say, man, I wish some of their ways they were here in America, because it's so nice. I mean, the way they are. I mean, the government is so messed up in Zimbabwe. I mean, it's like a dictatorship.
mm,
They're still, even after Mugabe died, but um, the people are just precious people. They're nice people, and they're not mean to you at all. They're just very. Her mom came over a couple of times, and her mom stayed one time like almost 3 months, and she didn't want to do that again because when she came back to Zimbabwe, her place was in disarray. But she said she'll never do it. But she stayed with us 3 months when we had one of our kids, and her mom, um, man, I tell you, Duke, I've never seen a woman clean like that woman. Everything was immaculate at the house. I came back and I said, "What?" I said, "What happened here? This place is clean." And so this is a good story. We bought a secondhand toy from like Goodwill or something. We bought it for the
mhm.
kids. My wife went there, and so I came home from work one day, and I looked and I saw this toy, and it looked like it just came out of the box. I said, "Would you?" I said, "You just bought a brand new toy for the kids?" And my wife says, "No, we got that toy at Goodwill." She said, "My mom just cleaned it and cleaned it up and made it look nice."
Wow.
I said, "Man, that thing looks like it just came out of the box." I said, "Wow." So, I mean, I told her, I said, if you moved to the United States, you would have and started your own cleaning business, you would
Mm.
make a ton of money if they clean like you. I said, because,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, you go to her place when I was in Zimbabwe, you could eat off the floor. I mean,
Wow.
her house was, it was a regular house, but it was immaculate. And she's getting older now. I don't know if she cleans that still that good, but she was. I told her, I said, "Wow, man, great having you around." Because she and my wife cleans, but my wife's not at that level.
Yeah.
she,
I need
she
some of that, man, whatever that is. Whatever that is, I need some of that. I do not enjoy cleaning.
I
I
don't
need
either.
some of that.
I don't either. But anyway,
Well, so, Ricardo, so you mentioned that, in your pastoral role, and, again, for anybody just listening and not watching, Ricardo is an African American man.
yes,
And,
Yeah.
so you mentioned that, in your ministry, you do have a lot of, Caucasians or even,
Right.
majority that come to the church. Is that something and something that you and I talked about is that I mean, that's something that's rare. I think in general, it's not super typical, but especially in the Deep South,
Right.
right?
Yes, it
It
is.
down here where you and I live,
Yes.
there's a tendency for there to be white churches and for there to be
Right.
black churches, and
Right.
then maybe you've got a little bit of, one way or the other. You've got a handful of, black people that attend the white church and a handful, it
Yes.
goes that way, but for the most part, it's a pretty rare thing what you were talking about as
Right.
far as the dynamic that you have working in your ministry currently.
Right.
Is that something that as far as building multicultural ministries, and I know you came down here and for church planting because God was calling you to this area, and that's something that I'd love to get into as well. Hopefully, we have time for it.
Mhm.
But is that something that was kind of on your radar, or something that was a desire in your heart as far as building multicultural ministries, or something that just kind of has happened
Well,
organically?
I think, I to be honest with you, I'm pretty amazed at it myself, dude, because
Yeah.
I we came down here and our our focus, I'm staff at that church 9 years up in Ohio, and the church was a spirit-filled, charismatic type church. And so some of the praise and worship that we have there, it's not like soul black praise and worship, like screaming and thank you, Jesus, and everything like that. It's not like that. It's like Hillsong or whatever, or
Mhm.
some different ones, different types of music. So I don't know if that's kind of what draws people, but we do have more Caucasians that come to our church, and I'm African American. We have more Caucasians that come to our church than we have blacks, that come. And we didn't set out to do that. We just were being us.
Mhm.
I mean, I grew up in a Baptist church where there was, a lot of that, and I know those songs, but my praise and worship style can be either. I'm not stuck in one or the
Yeah.
other. But a lot of times we know that the praise and worship that kind of ministers to people is from the heart, and some of that, other stuff is soulish. It's soulish. It's like, you get in the screaming, and you're like, are you praising God, or are you just screaming? It's like, what are you doing? You want to touch God when you're doing praise and worship. So we try to get songs that are trying to praise and worship, but I don't know why it's with Caucasians coming. It's just we've always drawn them mostly. And we have a lady from Mexico area, from down Brazil, well, from Brazil. She comes, and she's here. And then, we have Caucasian folks that come, and we have a few black people that come. It's a mixture. And
Mhm.
I think I said, man, thank God for that. I want to see more of that. And what I was talking to you about, I mean, I know you said that your pastor is African American,
Mhm.
and so you're on a staff of that, and that's what I wanted to talk to you. I mean, I said that was so important because when I was back in Ohio on the staff of that church, I was a pastor on staff. I wasn't just a musician. I wasn't
Right.
just somebody that was involved in some, and I'm not saying it's lower level, but
Sure.
just some type of ministry, just get involved. I was actually a pastor. I did funerals. I went and did funerals. I did weddings. And I got people that talk to me now and say, thanks for doing my wedding. They were Caucasian. I did their wedding. They were Caucasians. So, I think when the church, especially down here in the South, down here in Alabama, starts having different races on pastoral level, not just
Mm.
playing music, not just leading youth, but in on a main pastoral level, that's when things will break. I think
Yeah.
because then that's a position of authority, in a lot of churches. So
Yeah.
that's what I was saying to you on the phone. I think that's what needs to happen. That's why I'm glad your pastor's doing what he's doing with you, because
Yeah.
I saw the same thing with what you're doing back in Ohio with a large church, African American pastor. He had a huge church, and he had an associate pastor that was Caucasian for years. And I thought that was so awesome when I saw that happen. His church still grew, still was amazing. It was like it grew even more, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to happen across the country, because what did Billy Graham say? Billy Graham said that. I think he's the one that said between 9 and 12 noon on Sunday morning in America is the most segregated time in our country, on
It's the
Sunday
truth,
mornings.
man.
Billy Graham said something towards that effect. I'm probably not saying it exactly like he said it, but he
I know
said,
exactly what you're talking about, though.
yeah,
You got it
yeah,
close enough.
yeah. It was. He said it's the most segregated time in our country, and
Yeah.
he was right. And
Yeah.
so when we start doing more of that, I mean, we have a couple of big churches, here in Baldwin County, and I have yet to see, and I'm not down on them. I know a
Sure.
couple of the pastors. I know a couple of the pastors. I know them personally. I've talked to them on the phone, and I've met them and even ate with them. But I don't think that they have African Americans on their staff, and they're Caucasian on their
Yeah.
pastoral staff. When they're
Yeah.
large churches here in this area. So I'm saying that I would like to see that happen.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a very different thing when you walk into a church that is a, predominantly white church as opposed to a church that's predominantly black. There's a different feel, there's a different,
Right.
the way that emotions are touched in worship, the kind of music that's done, the kind of preaching that's done. There tends to be, of course, not in every church across the board, but speaking in generalities,
Right.
there tends
Right.
to be different, things that are very, very different. And I think that, I mean, the most important thing is that the church is touching, they're reaching the lost, that people are getting saved, that they're getting
Right.
discipled. That's the most important thing.
Right.
But I do believe that it is the heart of God that we see diversity, because there's unity in that. I mean, we're
Right.
supposed to be the representation of the heart of God here on the
Right.
earth. And so I believe that we should strive for that. And
I believe so too.
it doesn't happen, as you pointed out to me in our previous sort of like texting conversation. It doesn't happen by itself. It really very,
Right.
very rarely happens by itself. It's cool. It's awesome that it's actually happening through you and where you are. But even that, even though you didn't go out and say, I'm going to attract a bunch of white people to my church, like even though
No.
that wasn't what your
Yeah.
goal was,
No.
but still, you mentioned to me that it's like the style, of music and different things, and it's not that one way is right or one way is wrong. It's
Right.
just that it doesn't. We don't attract diversity if I'm a pastor and I'm starting a new church and I'm filling up my staff with all white people, then I'm probably going to be attracting all white people, or
Right.
99% white people,
Right.
because that's
Right.
the leadership that I'm setting up in place. And so something that you pointed out to me was, that's the way that you see diversity in your congregation, is when you have diversity in your leadership. This is a conversation that we have all the time. And it's not just about, having
Right.
white people and black people in leadership. It's also about, what are your practices in the church and in the ministry and in the operation of the church? Are you reaching out to people? Are you reaching out to different kinds of people, or are you
Right.
focused on what one kind of person is going to like? And
Right.
so it's something that we've been very, very intentional about from the beginning. Not, and we haven't been perfect at it by any means, but we've been intentional about it, and we've had conversations over and over again about
Awesome.
how can we attract
I love it.
people of all different, communities. How can we adjust our worship style like this? And so, kind of like what you were talking about, we would do songs like Hillsong and Bethel and things like that. But
Right.
our worship leader was so good at putting this his own kind of spin onto it, to give it a
Right.
little bit more soul, a little bit more,
Right. Like
and
spurs.
to make it
Right.
a little bit more palatable or more attractive, to
Right.
where, in other words, where it could be attractive to everybody. And
Right.
this is a difficult thing because people like what they like, and it's hard to
Right.
change what people like. And it's not even necessarily about trying to change what people like,
See,
but one way
yeah,
or another, I think that we've got to figure out how to do this, especially in this area where you and I live, where there
right.
really is so much
I agree.
segregation. And again, the most important thing is that the gospel is being preached, people are getting saved, people are being discipled, all of that. But within that, I really do believe that it's the heart of God, that there's diversity, that we're multicultural, that we're multi-ethnic,
I agree.
and that we're not just sticking with what's comfortable for us.
I agree. I agree. The thing is, you got to remember, and if somebody says, well, they have people coming to their churches, they say, well, I don't know of any. Well, I mean, I can't believe there's not anybody in your church that's of a different race that you can put on staff that's spiritual. And so
Yeah,
people say, well, I don't know anybody. I'm thinking, if there's people coming to your church, there's some spiritual people that you can, and probably that have the pastoral call or something like that, and you can look at them and say, hey, look, I'm going to groom you or bring you on staff. And so there are people there. So if people say there's nobody there, that's not true. I'm sure there's people, but like you said, you gotta come to a realization that what heaven's going to look like. We're going to be all different races,
come
all
on.
people together. So we got to get out of this mentality. People say, well, when I was doing it, they said, why don't you just have a preach to black people, black church? I said, I'm not doing that. I'm not just going to go up there and do all that hooping and screaming and stuff just so black people will come to my church. I said, I'm going to be has the Holy Spirit leads me neutral. And I get excited. I get it, but I'm not trying to be either or. I'm trying to be in the middle here, that we can draw every race, every people,
Yeah,
every background. So because some black people, when I was doing my church before, they would say, well, you should have some more black music in there. We're reaching black people. You should be reaching black people. I said, no, I'm not just reaching black people. I'm reaching every race of people.
yeah,
So I'm not into that. I'm into reaching every race of people. Like I said, we got a lady from Brazil that comes, and she's every Sunday. She's here every Sunday. So I mean, she loves it. She loves the praise and worship. And my wife, puts in there sometimes Shirley Caesar, or something, or is some soul in there, and I know that too, so I can praise God with that. And then she'll put in, like we said, Hillsong or Bethel or whoever you want to put in there. So we mix it up, and I think that has a lot to do with it. If we get a Caucasian praise and worship leader, I'm fine with that. I don't have any problem with that. That's or if we get an African American, that's fine with me too.
mm-hmm.
It's whoever God leads, but we want to keep people, to a point where they can see, hey, look, this church is for everybody. Legacy Family Church is for everybody. It doesn't matter. Don't feel like, oh, because people will come by and they see you and they think, oh, he's a black person, I can't come to that church. Some people think that.
Yeah,
They think, and I'm sure you
yeah,
have it in Mobile. They
sure,
think, oh, well, it's a black church. Then I can't go there. But that's ridiculous.
yeah.
That's totally ridiculous.
Well, here's the truth, Ricardo. It's more likely for a black person to go to a white church than for a white person to go to a
Yes, it
black
is.
church.
It is.
That's
It
just
is.
that's just the truth, and
It is.
it's
That's true.
it's sad,
You
man.
you got to learn.
Just overall, from a 30,000 foot view, it's this thing that you look at and you're like, man, like I wish that wasn't the case. I want to change this. Like I wish we could change this, and it's just one of those things. It's like differences in culture, but there's got to be a way for us to come together and to honor one another's, differences in culture and differences in preference and things like that. And somehow, incorporate those things. I was talking a while back to a friend of mine who's a pastor, more up north on the East Coast, And he pastors a church now where there's a lot of diversity, but he used to pastor a church where there was, like, I think 80 something nations represented in their
Wow,
congregation.
that's
And it
awesome.
was something that I was so, like, envious of, 'cause I loved it so
Yes,
much, but at the same time, it's like, that's gotta bring with it such unique challenges, because you want to find ways to honor and to incorporate, like, so many different cultures and
yeah,
practices and things like that into your worship service, into the experience that people are having, but obviously you can't do that, at least not on a weekly basis when you have
right,
that many,
right,
people
right,
and nations represented and cultures represented. So those are unique challenges, and it gets a little bit messy in terms of, how do we actually break down these walls and these barriers, these things that divide us? And as you said, I think it just comes down to, we've it's got to be spirit led, because the
right,
last thing that we want to do is just fill a position with a person just because of
right,
the color of their
right,
skin, or because
right,
of what country
right,
they're from, or whatever. It's
right,
got to be spirit led,
right,
but at the same time, I think we've got to be willing to drop our own barriers and defenses that we have up that would prevent us from, maybe even on a subconscious level, seeing the value in somebody or seeing the gifting in somebody, because
right,
maybe there's something that says, you know what I mean? Like, they're not my skin color, or they have a different way of doing things or different way of teaching or whatever. And so because it's not the way I do it, it must be inferior. And
right, right,
I think on a very basic level, getting past those things in our mind and being able to see people for who they are, not through the lens of whatever our own, ideas, preconceived notions, prejudices, even, and
sure.
things like that.
Sure. I
It's
mean, we know the history you do of William Seymour in 1906, the
Yeah,
Azusa
Azusa.
revival.
Mhm.
I mean, that was 1906, and he had people from all races, creeds, and backgrounds at that revival.
Mm,
I mean, it was a move of the Holy Spirit. I mean, that's probably what we were talking about getting down to, and instead of being so segmented, just when we let the Holy Spirit move and we see gifts in people. I like what you just said. You got to see, and I think some of them, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm just going to speak honest. I think some of them have seen the gifts in people that are not of their race, but they refuse to do it because of what people will think.
mm. Yeah, that's a
Some
big
of
one.
them have, some of these churches, right, and probably have seen the gifts in some people that are different races, and
That's a big one.
and said, oh man, they're gifted. I don't know about making that move. I don't know how that will look with the church. I don't know, but they need to not listen to that prejudice spirit, because that's a prejudice spirit, and say, I'm gonna bring that guy on anyway because God is
Yeah.
leading. You know,
Yeah, it's all I'm just thinking about it. It's almost easier when you're planting a church from scratch, to say, this is how we're going to build this from the ground up, and we're going to make sure that we have diversity of leadership.
right?
If you have a church that's been established for 30
Established for
years, and you've
years.
got some folks in your church that have been there for
Right. They're
25
gonna,
plus years,
right.
and they're like your big tithers, and you
Right.
know what I mean? And they're used to the culture being a certain way. That's
Right.
scary for a lot of pastors and leaders of ministries to suddenly want to rock the boat and shake things up and be like, oh, well, we're going to bring in this kind of flavor, or we're going to change up our worship format to be more like this. And people can get offended over such little things like that.
Right.
And Yeah, I do think that can really be a fear for a lot of people. And I think what you said is totally right on. We can be in that place where we do see the merit,
Yeah.
or we do see the gifting of somebody, but for fear of whether it's losing people, or for fear of
Right.
offending somebody else, or whatever, kind of like go the safe route instead of, again, just listening to what the Holy Spirit is saying in that situation.
Right.
It's a
Right.
huge one.
Yeah. That's true. That's a good comment. Yeah.
So, why Lower Alabama? I know that back in 2011, I think is what I read,
Yes.
that you started to sense this transition from the Lord, that He was transitioning you from the ministry that you were in to a greater focus on church planting, and you ended up coming to this area. What was it? Was it just God said this is it, or was there something else that kind of led you to this area in particular?
Yeah, I was praying in the Holy Spirit. I had never been down here. I had never
Wow.
been down to the South. My mom is from, I found out, and I probably knew this when we were growing up, but I didn't think about it. But she's from Alabama here, about a few miles north of here.
Okay.
She actually, I mean, well, well, let me go back and say this to be correct. Her parents are from here. Her mom and dad were from here. She was actually born up in Ohio. So I got to correct that. Her folks were from a little bit more north. So, and I met some of them when I first came down here, but I just felt I was praying and God was starting to move me from getting me not satisfied, and I was just and I started praying, Lord, what do you want me to do? And Alabama came up in my spirit. He said, I want you to move to Alabama. I said, Alabama? I was like, what? So I just kept praying about it. And then I found out somebody down here that was living down here that was actually at our church at one point, and they were working in the parking lot, uh, directing traffic. And I was over them, because I was over all the volunteers. So I found out that they were down here and living in Daphne, well, Malbus, really, which is near
Mhm.
Spanish Fort. So I found out they were living there. And so we came down for a conference in Louisiana at one of the churches in Louisiana. And I told my pastor, I said, I'm just going to go. I'm not going to go back with you guys. I'm going to go over to this guy, where this guy stays over in Malbus, and I'm going to check out the area. I'm praying about some things, and he was fine. We said, all right. So I went over and stayed with him for a few days, prayed, and felt God was calling me to this area. So I went back home and told my wife, and she was like, what? And I said, I just feel it. I said, I know we don't know anybody down there, but God's calling us. So we packed up, and said I had been there 9 years and 6 months at that church, 9 years and
Wow.
6 months on staff, and I had my own secretary, had my own parking space, had a retirement plan set, had
Nice
all that.
cushy job, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was nice, and so I said I'm moving out, and so my pastor, I told him, I said, I believe I know where God's called me to go, and he goes, Texas, right? Texas. He was like, he said, is that where you think God's calling you? I said, no, Alabama. He goes, Alabama. He was like, he was the same way. He was like, "What are you doing? They're going to Alabama." So I said, "Well," and then before I left, he played. I remember I stepped up on the podium to talk to everybody, kind of before I left. One of the times, and he was playing the Alabama song in the speakers, "Sweet Home
Sweet home
Alabama."
Alabama, baby. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, I got to love that song now. I like it, but he was playing it, and so I came down, and we packed up. It was winter time. It was in January, and we came down. My wife was pregnant with our third, no, our fourth. So we've had from 4 till 9 down here. She's
Wow.
pregnant with our fourth, and we came down. She drove one car, I drove another car, and we had walkie talkies. We came down here, stayed at a hotel, and we had people raise a lot of money for us to
That's
start,
awesome.
because our pastor had a lot of business people at the church, so they got together and did a fundraiser and raised a lot of money for us to start off. So
Yeah.
it was a blessing. So we just felt God called us. I just can tell you that. I don't have any other thing that to tell you that we felt God called us, and so we came down here and planted this church, and we just are waiting. We're just looking to see what God's going to do in the future.
Mm.
That's what we're doing right now.
So, man, we got here, like, almost right around the same time. My wife and I moved here in, I think it was September of 2011.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
really the same time.
yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we've been in each other's backyard for, well, across the bay, but, close
Yeah,
enough
across the state.
for
Yeah.
for for the entire time. So anyway, it's cool that we finally got a chance to connect.
Yeah, yeah.
But, so in that, so having the sense that the Lord was leading you here, and then I know that I mentioned earlier as I was just kind of sharing a little bit about your bio and your background that you had this sense or that you knew that the Lord was calling you into ministry from a pretty young age, from the age of 17.
Mhm.
Um, what can you tell me for you as far as your journey of hearing God's voice or learning to hear God's voice, learning to be led by the Spirit, is that something that that you have struggled with or do struggle with, or is it hearing the voice of God and knowing that it's God's voice? Is that something that's always kind of clicked for you or been natural, or is it something that's been a learning process for you,
Oh, man,
or
that's a good
both? It's okay if it's
question.
both.
That's a great question, Duke, man. It's been a learning process. It's not always been, 100% hearing it, bam, and then going. I've I fasted,
Mm,
prayed, and I did one before I came down here. I remember I went away and fasted for a few days to make sure I was doing the right thing, and I had a peace about
that's
it.
awesome.
I was just thinking about that the other day, that question, because we always want to hear God's voice, particularly, and want to know God's voice. But the Bible talks about let the peace of God be your umpire, right? In life,
Yeah.
let it direct you.
Colossians
So
3:15.
Colossians 3:15. So you try to go by that peace, and big decisions need big guidance. I once heard a minister say that. So you need big confirmations if you're making a big decision like a move.
Mm,
So you need a lot of confirmation. You don't just step out and move. So if I'm making a big decision, I'm fasting, I'm praying, um, I'm seeking God about the future, and just like with I have my book here, glory to God, my um, prayer journal here. I don't want to see what's all on it, so I'll just go like that real quick.
Flash
But
it quick.
it's a prayer journal. But I have on there things that I'm praying about, and I just came off of a fast, 3-day fast. I usually pray for every one of my children. I go on a fast for every one of my children. When I
Wow,
find
that's
out my
beautiful.
wife's pregnant, when I find out she's pregnant, then I go on a 3 or 4 day fast, however much the Lord leads me, and I'm praying for her health during the pregnancy. I'm praying for the baby, that the baby is 100% whole, healthy, no problems with the physical part or anything, that the baby fulfills God's purpose and that her
Mm,
body's well. Because she's a little older now. She's had nine, this is her ninth, she's in her 40s. And this is, 42 she is, my wife now. So it's a little bit different when she's older. So
sure.
we pray for that, and I've always done that. So that's something I just came off of doing that just last week. I even had a mattress here at the church. I
Wow.
actually slept in 3 nights here at the church. I actually told her, and she goes, "That's fine. I know where you're at because we don't live that far from the church." So I took a mattress here, Duke, and I fasted for 3 nights, and there's some other things I prayed over, and I just felt after prayer that God was. I had 5 things that I fasted besides that for and prayed, and God was going to do it, and I believe He's doing it. He's confirmed it in my prayer time. So you're talking about hearing God's voice, and you know, you have to pray it through, and when you pray it through, and you got a peace, then you go and do it. You go right after it. So it's not been just automatic. It's been praying and seeking God's will. I don't just want to
Hmm.
step off, and I think everybody should be that way. Everybody's got to be that way. There might be something that God says to you, okay, go this direction, like right away, and you just know, okay, that's it.
Sure.
But when you're making decisions, major decisions about your life and your future, you need to get in some prayer and you need to have God's peace lead and guide you. So that's what I try to do all the time.
Mm. I
You know,
so appreciate what you just said.
yeah,
Um, something that we've always been really big on is teaching people that they can hear the voice of God and teaching practical things for learning to grow in hearing the voice of God. I know for me, for a lot of years, and especially at the early part of my ministry, just really struggled a lot with hearing God's voice. And
right.
I figured I would just make excuses for why I couldn't hear God's voice, and that was it. I kind of lived that way for a little while, and I got kind of comfortable, or I had a sense of comfort, I should
Mhm.
say, in my mind in the early part of my ministry of kind of like doing ministry with just with the Bible, which is awesome, which is our number one tool, but like
Mhm.
with the word of God, but without, hearing that fresh rhema from God on an ongoing basis. And I would kind of make excuses for myself and justify it in my mind. And it just was this major battle for me for a while. And God started to show me some things, and the Holy Spirit's the best teacher, and he'll teach us and he'll lead us and he'll show us things,
Right.
when we really allow him to do that. And so I believe that hearing the voice of God is supposed to be simple, like it's supposed to be a normal aspect of our lives. But I
Uh-huh.
so appreciate what you said there about fasting and about kind of like taking your responsibility on your end to say, God, like, I want to hear you clearly on this.
Yes.
And I'm not just going to say, God, speak to me. And if I don't hear you, or if I don't have clarity or whatever, that I'm going to somehow, blame you, or that I'm going to somehow like give up or whatever. Like, let
Right.
me, let me take some responsibility on my end as well. And, I don't believe in fasting from by any means from a religious standpoint, or from this
Right.
thing of like, oh, I have to fast so that I can hear God, or I have
Right.
to fast so that God can be pleased with me. Like, no, that's
Right.
not why we fast.
Right.
But there
Right.
is something real about setting aside time and setting
Yes.
aside yourself, right? And kind of like setting yourself apart for a season, whether it's a day or if it's an
Right.
hour or if it's a week or whatever it is,
Right.
and just kind of setting yourself aside to the Lord and saying,
Got to do it.
you know what, God, I'm gonna make this about you, and I'm gonna put in the work, so to speak. And again, this is not a works thing. It's not about works. And
Hmm.
it's not like fasting is not this thing. It can become this thing for us where all the spiritual disciplines, right? Fasting, worship, prayer, Bible reading, going to church, all these different things that we do,
Right.
we can turn it into this thing where we think that it's like us twisting the arm of God, trying to get him to respond or trying to get him to do something for us.
Right.
And that's not what it is at all. It's me saying, you know what? Like, I've probably got some junk in my head, and it'd be best for me, and for me getting to that place where I can have receive that peace of God that surpasses
Sure.
understanding, if I can
Sure.
kind of just kind of get over myself for a little bit. And sometimes I've
Right.
got to set myself aside, set myself apart, get out of the regular routine of life, and fast, or whatever that looks like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a beautiful thing that you just said. It's super practical. And, I think that that's something that gets overlooked a lot of times,
Yeah.
um, in,
Yeah.
in daily life. You know what I mean?
Well, you gotta. This is the thing, Duke. You gotta shut your flesh down because your flesh is always. I mean, your flesh. There's got to be a point where there's times where you shut your flesh down and you let your spirit man rise up, because I mean your flesh sometimes tries to dominate your life, and it does. And I don't care how spiritual you are, that happens. And so fasting gives you, allows you to shut your flesh down, to stop it, and to say, okay, I'm in, we're in control now. The Spirit of God and my human spirit. I want to hear what God is saying inside me. I don't want the flesh to be involved in this. I
Mm,
want to hear what God is saying, because the flesh will keep talking. It'll keep giving reason. It'll keep, but there's times you got to shut that flesh down. So I think that's part of it too. That's a big part of it, and it works. It works. It takes you some time to just sit. I mean, I'm telling you, because your mind's always going. Your mind's going 100 miles an hour, different places. You need to just sit and just see. God's not speaking in your intellect, right? He's not speaking in your intellect. God is speaking in your spirit, your heart. That's where is. He's not in your intellect. He's in your heart. So you that's where he's going to speak at you. Yeah, he's not going to speak to you in your body. He's not going to speak to you in your mind. He's going to speak to you in your spirit, because that's where he is. That's where he's residing. So you got to shut down all the other areas and say, I want to hear what you're saying inside my spirit, man. You know, and that's the battle. That's the battle, to hear that at different times, and he'll lead and guide you. You know, and I'm talking about major decisions on this aspect. You know, and then there's times you just want to get along and just hear God about other things. You know, there's direction, and once you heard it, what I hear, I'm trying to, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was like, or Robert said it. He was saying it, I think, to um, one of the ministers. He said, "Look, when you know what God's called you to do, and you have God's assurance in it, God's peace," he said, "you go and do it. Hell high water, you complete that thing.
Mhm.
You do whatever you have to do." And I'm not saying it quite like he said it, but he said, "You do whatever it takes to get that thing done when you know that God's told you to do it." You know,
Yeah.
once you know and you're knower, don't let anybody else talk you out of it. Don't let anybody else stop you. You know,
Yeah.
you go do it once you know for sure. So that's what I try. That's what we're trying to do. You know, during those times. You know, hear
Yeah.
God's voice.
Yeah, and something that's been really helpful for me is just kind of learning to hear God speak in the like the mundanity. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but just sort of in regular everyday life.
Hmm.
And just learning to hear God, learning to just kind of have that fellowship on the level of relationship, because so often God just wants to talk to you. He wants to, we talk about prayer and we think about prayer as this sort of one-way thing where we're telling God what we want or how we feel or whatever, and we don't always give him the opportunity to speak to us. But
Right.
he's speaking to us. Like he
Yeah.
like Jesus is the word. Like Jesus is the word
Yeah.
of God. He's not quiet. He's not distant from us in terms of
Yeah.
that. And so often I think that God just wants to talk to us, even just on the level of relationship,
Yeah.
reminding us that he loves us, reminding us like so, so often in my daily life, like I'll just have these thoughts kind of pop into my mind of, something that I forgot to do or
Right.
whatever. And, it's so easy to just say, like, oh good, I just remembered that, or oh, I'm just thinking about this person or
Hmm.
whatever. But I think when we learn to live with an expectation of God's voice, it just helps us to be better positioned to hear his
Yeah.
voice. And I think that it's within
That's good.
the regular everyday living kind of stuff where we learn to have that communion with God. I think that it positions us to hear God more clearly when it comes to the big things of life. So it's
Right.
not, I haven't heard God in years and all of a sudden I've got this ginormous decision to make that's going to affect my entire life and my family.
Your
And of
family. Right.
course God can still get through to me and he can speak to me, he can make it clear, and he can do all that. He can. But I just think that if we're learning to sort of develop that lifestyle of walking with
Yeah.
the Lord, where it's not just us talking and complaining about stuff and calling it prayer, but it's like having conversations with God,
Listen. Right.
you know what I mean? Then I just think that it makes it that much more. I don't want to say easy, even though it really. Well, anyway, I don't necessarily want to use the word easy, but I just think it becomes simplified for us when it comes to, again, those bigger decisions. And yeah, and again, and I'm totally with you on the side of, take some time, especially if you've got a big decision to make or whatever.
Right.
Take some time to fast. Set some time aside for the Lord. And I don't fast probably as much as I should. I
Neither
used
do
to
I.
I
Neither
used
do
to
I.
fast a
Oh,
lot.
neither do
I
I.
I used to fast a lot. I used to fast like um a lot, let's just say. and it became a religious thing for me. It
Right.
got to the point where
You don't
it
want,
was this religious thing where if I didn't do it, or if I didn't do enough days, that I felt condemned. And so
uh,
I got to a point where I kind of went
that's not
away, I kind of, and that was a bunch of years ago. But we we do certain things as a pastoral team. We do periodic fasts. As a church family, we do a fast, once a year, as a lot of churches do. On a personal level, you know, I'm a little bit. What I probably don't fast as much as I should, so I'm not trying to like paint myself as some spiritual
I don't
giant
either.
who's like so good at
Uh,
fasting. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
there's for real merit in that, and it's
Well, see,
yeah, anyway.
yeah, I was thinking when you were talking in the Bible, when they were, what was it, Silas and there were some people they were commissioning for ministry in the book of Acts. They said when they had prayed and fasted, then the Holy Ghost said, separate,
Yeah.
Paul
Yeah.
and Silas for the work I've called them to. I'm trying to remember the exact scripture, but people that are Bible scholars know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. There was prayer and fasting before they placed them in the ministry and where they wanted them to go. So like you're saying, um, there's times I don't do it all. I mean, like I say, I don't. There's times I don't do it every week or but there's specific things that when it comes to, like I said, with my wife's the children, I usually do, and stuff like, and then decisions about coming down here. I remember I got into some prayer and fasting to make sure
Mm,
that I was making, because you're moving a whole family. You're moving a
yeah.
whole situation. So you just need to make sure this is what God's telling you to do. And now putting on your pants in the morning, you don't need to fast and pray about that, or brush, or where you should stop and eat food. People start doing all that, then they're going a little crazy, and then,
It gets legalistic
yeah,
quick.
get legalistic. But you
I
can,
was one of those Christians for a while, man.
yeah, yeah, don't do
For
that.
sure. Like,
Don't do,
what color am I supposed to wear today? What, like,
yeah,
all this kind of stuff. It can get controlling, and that's
yeah.
not God. God's
No,
not out
that's
to
not
control us,
no, no,
for
no,
sure.
no, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. All
Yeah.
right.
Brother, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate the time that I've had with you, getting to know you a little bit more and hear your story and your background and what God's doing in you and through you. I'm super excited that you have another baby on the way. It's amazing. God bless you guys. We've got another one on
How
the way
many
as
do
well,
you
but
have?
it's only
How
number
many do
3
you
for
have?
us. So we've
Oh,
got
you
2
got three?
boys. We've
Okay.
got 2 boys, and my wife is due next month. We're having a little girl.
Oh, awesome.
So,
Congratulations.
yep. Thank you, man.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Congratulations. Yeah. Maybe you guys will keep going now.
Yeah, we're a third of the way to you. Uh, but the thought process that you were thinking of, that you were mentioning earlier, is something that became very real to me, because my wife and I originally, we had talked about having 4 or 5 kids or something like that, and we have 2, and we've had 2 for a while. Our oldest, or excuse me, our youngest is 7 right now.
Okay.
So we've had 2 kids for 7 years,
Wow.
and in my mind, for a while, I was thinking, well, maybe we're done, maybe at some point we'll adopt or something like that, but maybe we're just done. And my wife was kind of getting the baby fever again, and she's here, so she's staring me down right now, but it's the truth. And then so I
I probably scared her when I
yeah.
when you told her how many. Tell her, don't be scared. She needs to talk to my wife. Tell her.
No, it's all good. But I started to have this thought process, and I actually had some conversations with people and articulated it, that I was like, you know what? Right now I'm thinking about where I'm at, and with our kids and our family, and it's comfortable, and just thinking about finances and just like the different things. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to get to the point in my life where, 20, 30 years from now, I'm looking back and I'm seeing my kids growing up and building their families and seeing grandkids running around and stuff like that, and look back and be like, you know what? Like, have that regret or disappointment that we stopped too soon because we
Right.
were too focused on the present and too focused on being comfortable. And
Right.
that was something that I struggled with a little bit when kind of getting ready and just trusting the Lord enough
I
to
understand. I understand.
intentionally go for child number 3. And
Hmm.
but anyway, we're so pumped, we're so excited, and the fact that we're having a girl is
That's awesome.
just
The
amazing.
2 boys,
God
yeah.
answers prayers because you know
You can't,
my wife is super outnumbered.
yeah, you can't. The one thing you got to get rid of is selfishness. Because man, when you have a big family,
Yeah,
selfishness goes out the door. I mean,
yeah.
you don't have any selfishness, man. I mean, my chips are gone, my food, my drinks are gone, my pops are gone. I come home, I said, "Hey, I thought I had a pop," and they said, "So and so took it." And my wife said, "I said okay," or so I have to hide some of my candy bars if I get like a treat every once in a while. But
I
that's
can't
all
even
right.
imagine with 8 and with teenagers. Ugh.
But it's. I tell you, you like I say, I told you that was the number one regret I've heard from people. What you just said, they
Yeah,
wish they would have had more. And these are older women that come to me. I come to, and they say it to my wife. They say it. They say, "You are so blessed. I wish I would have had more." You know.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
but anyway,
Whew.
all right. Well,
Yeah, man.
God,
Well, where could we just let's see, where can we point some people if they're interested in checking out some of your sermons or something
yes,
like
they're
that? Is that
all
the church website or
yes, they're on our website. It's Legacy Family Alabama all together. LegacyFamilyAlabama.com. LegacyFamilyAlabama.com. Thanks for putting it on there. LegacyFamilyAlabama.com. All my sermons are on there. They go come on every week. I put them on after I preach them within that week. Sometime I try to get them on for the most part. So they're on there. Also, I told you at the end we have a newsletter,
Oh yeah,
and the newsletter is a Speak Truth newsletter. But the way we do the newsletter, and I was just felt in, there's a story behind it. So people want to know why I do it this way. But I felt that the Lord told me just to send it to households, to homes. I don't do anything with social media with it. I just get addresses and I actually write it out and type it out and I send it to people's homes monthly, once a month.
mm,
So if people are interested in that, and it's kind of a it's issues driven. I mean, I talk biblically about things, but I talk about some of the hot button issues. Like abortion, like um, some of the things people don't want to talk about, gay rights and all that
mhm,
stuff, and all the things, and political. I might hit on some of that. We talk about some of those things. Plus, we bring scripture into it, and we talk about some of those hot button issues that some churches won't even touch on Sunday morning, won't even go there.
sure.
So that's what the newsletter kind of is about. We actually teach there times too, just might have a teaching, but mainly that's kind of the thrust of it. So it's Speak Truth newsletter, and they can get it by going on our website and submitting their home address to me, and we'll get it out to them if they're interested in it. So,
Awesome.
all right.
LegacyFamilyAlabama.com.
Yes.
Um, all right. Well, Ricardo, thank you again, sir. I appreciate you, appreciate your ministry. It's cool that we're like-minded in a lot of different ways here, and I'm pumped just to know you and to get to know you a little bit better going forward here as well.
Me too. Me too. Got a good relationship going.
Yeah,
Duke, I appreciate you, man. Like to meet your pastor too sometime. That would be awesome too.
it'd be awesome. And hey, listen, if there's anything that comes up, anything that I can do to just be supportive to you, to your ministry, anything, just don't hesitate to ask.
Same here. Same here. Same here. Me too. So, all right. God bless.
Right. Yeah, you too. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to check out this episode. Really appreciate you guys. I hope that it was blessing to you, encouraging, maybe challenging in some way. If it blessed you in any way, if you'd consider subscribing, sharing, leaving a review, leaving a comment, anything like that, I just appreciate you guys so much. You can catch all past episodes at redcircle.com/shows/real live talk or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google, etc. So yeah, have a good rest of your week.
Amen.